I don't know in the history of being around this game if I've ever seen a more difficult 4-game stretch at LSU, at Miami, at home against Texas, and on the road at Texas A&M. Still, 4 successive games against those types of opponents is brutal.
What is up, everyone? Hope you're having a great Tuesday. Thanks again for making Crain & Company a daily watch and or listen, or both, which would be fantastic. We appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe as well. Got another great show for you today, as we're going to talk about a team and a coach that has been a roller coaster ride, unlike a lot that we've seen at other top brands with Billy Napier in Florida. Now, last year before the season, they were ready to bury this guy. You know, put him on the raft, start singing the songs. And some of us, well, 2 of us.
Not me.
Said, just hold on a second. We think maybe, even with that tough schedule, he can turn the tide. And now going into this year, not that last year was some unbelievable success, but he really answered the haters with a solid year with, again, a very tough schedule. There's a little bit more confidence and swagger in Gainesville heading into this year. We're going to get down to the roster, the personnel, the position groupings, the schedule. There's not a better guy that we could bring on to talk about Florida than an ex-Gator, right? Which I guess you're always a Gator for life. He's just not allowed to play anymore. NFL vet. You can catch him on SEC Network, which is ESPN, SEC This Morning, Sirius XM. Our buddy, Chris Doering. CD, what's up, buddy?
What's up, buddy?
What's up? And I'm sitting here in awe, looking at this set, looking at the production value, because Jake, when you and I got to know each other, I was doing phoners with you, and this was just a small time little show you were doing. Now, this is big, man. I mean, obviously, I watch all the stuff that you guys do, but just seeing this whole production here is pretty impressive.
Well, Chris, it's funny. I was actually thinking about that on the way to work this morning. You were like the 3rd guy I ever had on the J-Boy show, which is doing out of a back room in a house in Tupelo, Mississippi. And you were unbelievably kind enough to come on. Nobody knew about who I was or what I was doing. I mean, it kind of accidentally happened. So I'll always be in your debt as well for doing that. It just shows the type guy that you are. And I couldn't do it, obviously, without the rest of the group here. Former Michigan quarterback David Cohn, former Western State Colorado wide receiver Blaine Crain. He's hoping Florida fans forgive him for what he said last year. I'm not letting it slide. Go ahead, CD.
I was just going to say, let me give you credit, because the reason that I kept doing the show back in the day when it was the J-Boy show is because obviously you know ball. I know the 3 of you guys collectively know ball, so it makes it easier to accept these midweek morning interview requests than some of these guys that get on there and have no clue what they're talking about.
Well, Chris, thanks for coming on. That's all we need today. We really appreciate it. But again, real recognize real at the end of the day. And you know, it's always fun to talk with somebody who can speak the language, but also loves the game as much as you do. And that's really where I kind of want to start with Florida. And you're obviously tapped in to the fan base and what they're feeling. It just, the drastic change in preseason sentiment this year as opposed to last year is about as wide as I think you can find around the college football landscape in the positive way. Now, Florida State, I think it may be the exact opposite after what happened last year, even though I know some fans are confident in them. But when you look at this Florida team and this roster and where Billy is, for the Florida fans that are watching right now, how confident should you be in this season? And what do you think the ceiling is? Is this a college football playoff caliber team, even with a brutal schedule that we're going to go through?
You know, I would correct you because you're contrasting this preseason with last preseason. I think last preseason there was a lot of optimism. You felt like there was an opportunity to move forward. You know, you felt like you were in good shape with a couple quarterbacks. You felt like that the team was getting better on the lines of scrimmage. And then you come out and you get dominated the way that Florida did by Miami and Texas A&M. I think it wasn't the score as much as the physical domination, particularly on the lines of scrimmage. And I didn't see any path to getting better. You guys know this. Like in the middle of the season, you're not going to go out and get free agent pickups. You're not going to sign guys. You're not going to get stronger during the season. So I thought it was going to be a long year for Florida based upon their inability to hold up on the lines of scrimmage. And then all of a sudden, something changed. I don't know that I've ever seen a more remarkable in-season change than I saw from Florida. That first half of the Texas game, you're down 42-0, I think, there. It looked like it was just the end of this run for Billy Napier. And then all of a sudden, you see some signs of life, and they put it together, and they become not only a team that can hold up on lines of scrimmage. I think the reason you won a number of those games in November was because of your ability to be penetrating on the defensive line, to be able to run the ball better. So it was an amazing turnaround, and I think that turnaround has Florida fans feeling very optimistic, particularly finally getting a DJ Lagway that you presume is going to be healthy. You didn't see much of that even when he was, taking the team through the run they went on. But I do have in the back of my mind, guys, this fear of an unprepared team like I saw last year. Why were they not ready to go? Why were they not better? Why did they get to where they got at the end of the year, but why were they not ready to go at the beginning of the year? That's the one fear I have right now.
Yes, especially playing a rival in Miami, in the swamp. You think you'd be itching and ready to go. And when you see guys like we saw at the end of the year, and we can talk about Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks. I'm really excited about the linebacker group that Florida has. I think they have a chance to be as good as any in the country. Why did it take so long to flip that switch? But I will say, on the opposite side of that, I don't know if there's a better compliment that you can give to a head coach whose team is able to turn it around after that disaster, because a lot of cultures and programs and locker rooms would have folded the tent, and maybe Billy has used that as an example to say, guys, if we want to make the college football playoff or win the SEC, we can't start the way we did last year. We're good enough to do it. Do you feel like maybe that could be a chip on the shoulder thing that Billy's been using all offseason to say we need to start hot and get even hotter?
No question. And I think what you see now is a coach that has a pulse on his team.
Yeah.
And talking with some of the defensive players last year, they felt like they had no relationship with their head coach. You look at Billy Napier, he's the head coach, he's the play caller, he's the quarterback coach, doing everything on the offensive side, but really didn't spend much time with the defensive guys at all. That's one of the things that changed during their bye week. He goes back and talks about how they made it more competitive in practice, but I also think it was his presence on the defensive field. You guys know this. I mean, that you cannot – as a head coach, you have to have a relationship with both sides of the ball. And as much as you may spend time as a play caller with one side, you got to be able to relate to the other. I think Sark does an incredible job of that at Texas. But I think that's where you build from, is this team that was well connected last year despite the adversity they went through. Let's start fast and see what we can accomplish instead of trying to dig ourselves out of a hole like we did last September.
Well, Cohen, we always talk about head coaches that are play callers, how to delineate practice time to make sure it's not the head coach, the offensive play caller, versus the defensive coordinator, and they're like co-head coaches, because that never works.
And I've seen it a bunch of times, and I do want to talk about the defensive side, Chris, but I'm glad you pointed to the turnaround in the middle of the season there, because that's one thing that stood out to me. You got a Florida team in 2024 that was sitting at 4-5, and then they reel off 4 wins in a row to get to that 8-win mark. But with a true freshman quarterback, it would have been so easy for some of those upperclassmen just to pack it in and say, hey, this season's done, and they didn't do that. So I want to ask about your quarterback, DJ Lagway. Last year, he did some phenomenal things. I think he throws one of the best deep balls in the country. Obviously, he comes in highly touted, 5-star guy, big-time recruit for Billy Napier. But I want to ask you, what is DJ Lagway's health right now looking like heading into 2025? And just what are your expectations? I mean, Tim Tebow won the Heisman Trophy in year 2 when he was a Florida Gator. What are the expectations for DJ Lagway entering this year?
Yeah, I'll go back to your first question about his health. Holding him out during the spring was very just precautionary. A lot of people talking about the shoulder. The reports that I heard that it was more of some sort of hernia type issue that dated back to his high school days that they were aware of, that they were trying to rest and not have too much strain on the shoulder by having him throw when his midsection wasn't right. It is frustrating, though. I mean, you may have gotten him healthy, but you lost a lot of practice time, a lot of time with new receivers. And we'll go into talking about some of those weapons, but going out and getting J. Michael Sturdivant from UCLA, getting Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown from the high school ranks, just continuing to create more continuity with your offense as a whole for any quarterback is important, but a freshman quarterback that, only played half the games last year, it definitely makes you a little nervous. Now, with that being said, I think people look at DJ Lagway and say, look how well he played last year with the hamstring injury and everything else. Imagine what he's going to be like if he's actually healthy and gets a full season under his belt. Keeping him upright is of utmost importance. I'm anxious to see him more involved in the run game too, something he certainly has the ability to affect the defense with. The dude is massive. I mean, he's like 250 pounds, but I think you look at the offseason, it was focused on surrounding him with weapons. They did that at receiver, as we just talked about. They're about 5 deep at the running back spot. Everybody knows how much Billy Napier loves using the tight end. And then the offensive line, this is where I was at practice a couple times during the spring. Just looking at the offensive and defensive lines, they look different. They look like what you would expect from an Alabama or a Georgia. So I think they've upgraded there. And that offensive line is very experienced, maybe the best center in the conference.
Agreed.
Coming back again for Florida. So I really like what they've done to add the pieces. DJ Lagway is the focal point, but without the supporting cast, he's only somewhat effective.
No doubt. And back to the defensive point that you and Jake were talking about, the post-spring depth chart right now has no incoming transfers or no true freshmen starting on that defense. So these are guys that have been in the program, but this is also a defense that ranked second to last in total defense a season ago. And you know, Chris, you just can't win in this league or anywhere around the country unless you have an imposing force on the defensive side of the ball. Can Florida be that this year, or what are we to expect from Florida's defense?
I think they can be. It starts up front with the defensive line, and Jake, you mentioned a few of the guys that Florida's excited about. But honestly, it's the linebacker position. And you said, I think they're the best linebacking core in the conference. A guy to keep your eye on, Miles Graham. His dad, Ernest Graham, was a great running back at Florida back in the 90s and early 2000s. Miles, you saw him as the season wore on last year, start to get more reps. He had 2 massive goal line plays against Ole Miss and that win over the Rebels in November. He's going to be a stud this year. They got a lot of talent at that linebacker spot. That's not something they've been able to say for quite a few years here in Gainesville.
Summer means more time outside enjoying every moment. But we all need a sidekick who can keep up so we can enjoy our favorite music, podcasts, and calls in crystal clear sound all day long. Well, that sidekick is everyday earbuds by our friends at Raycon.
True.
Raycon's everyday earbuds are the perfect summer accessory. Whether you're at the gym, taking work calls outside, or listening to Crain and Company tell you exactly what's going to happen during football season. Maybe you're barbecuing, maybe you're tailgating, it doesn't matter. You want to enjoy premium audio that goes where you go. Now, their latest model has a 32-hour battery life and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with 2 devices at once. Now, with Raycon's quick charge function, just 10 minutes of charging gives you 90 minutes of battery. That's an hour and a half. Plus, they come with active noise cancellation at just half the price of other premium auto brands. So, Raycon's everyday earbuds, they also come in a spectrum of vibrant colors to match your summer vibe. Listen, whether you're running, you don't want to deal with the wires. Again, it's just quality at a great price. All right, maybe you got some old earbuds that you're tired of. Maybe you want some new ones. Well, this is the best way to go. Birthday present, and it's a great stocking stuffer too. So if you're loving your Raycons, they offer a 30-day happiness guarantee return policy. No questions asked. So go to buyraycon.com/booster to get 15% off Raycon's best-selling everyday earbuds. And right now, Raycon's offering 15% off their best-selling everyday earbuds only at buyraycon.com/booster. That's buyraycon.com/booster. Raycon, have you heard about it? And any linebacker will tell you he's only going to be as good as the defensive line that's in front of him.
Good.
So, yeah, and they're really, when you talk about Miles Graham, when you talk about Grayson Howard and the depth in that room, that's great. But those guys can reach their potential because you look at what and what Florida has returned. I think LJ McCray may be the most exciting out of the bunch. Like I'm a huge Tyreek Sapp fan. Caleb Banks, we know he's a freak there that can play on the inside. Getting Lyons back, who was hurt last year, I think is going to help. But when I look at LJ, who I believe was the top D-line recruit, I think in 2024 coming out, and you look at potential, I think this dude has a chance to be a early day one pick down the road. So it's not just that the linebackers are good and the D-line's okay. It's that the D-line ought to be really good and deep, which let those linebackers play. They can see it better. They can scrape an attack. They can fill the gap quicker. That front 7 for Florida could be one of the top 3 in the country, Chris, at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're right about LJ McCray too, and that was a huge get for Florida a couple signing periods ago. You're starting to see these young guys get some reps, start to develop physically, start to get the intellectual development. But how about the fact that you mentioned what a mess the situation was defensively last year? You had 2 different coordinators, right? Austin Armstrong, and then you bring Ron Roberts in. I don't think anybody really knew who was leading the defense last year. Austin Armstrong now gone. Ron Roberts, clearly the guy that's in charge. And so I think the clarity and the message that's coming from the top down is going to help the defense as well.
It sure as hell makes practice a lot easier.
When Florida was Florida, I know they had all the speed, they had all the flash and everything, but you go look back when they won all those games, those national championships, up front on both sides of the ball.
For sure.
That's where the difference was. And you look – go ahead,
that's what's been crazy about it. It's like Florida has always been known for having great defensive line play. You know, you go back into the 80s and the 90s, like there are only a finite number of big, strong, physical, agile guys walking around. You have to get those guys. Florida used to get them. Alabama and Georgia have been getting them recently, but I think Florida's starting to be able to keep some of those guys, particularly the ones in state, back in the fold. And that's been, I think, a big part of what you've seen in terms of their improvement the last couple of years.
Huge. Could be the difference this year. Let's get to the schedule. Yeah. All right, it's about time. You know, CD, if you need to close your eyes, close your ears, it's not great. It's a little bit of murderer's row. But, hey, week 1, you got Long Island. That ought to be fun.
Yeah, that is a Long Island.
South Florida at home. And this stretch right here, you're at LSU, at Miami, Texas at home, at Texas A&M, Mississippi State at home, Georgia at home, at Kentucky, at Ole Miss, Tennessee at home, then Florida State at home. CD, that's tough. Give me your thoughts.
Well, guys, you know, I think it used to be every SEC team had a 3-game stretch that was going to define their season, right? Now it's become a 4-game stretch with the addition of Oklahoma and Texas. It makes it even more difficult. But I don't know in the history of being around this game if I've ever seen a more difficult 4-game stretch with having to play that LSU, at Miami, at home against Texas, and on the road at Texas A&M. Now, you do get a bye week in there, but still 4 successive games against those types of opponents is brutal. Now, the one thing I will say is let's be honest. Florida played the same schedule last year. We talked about it a lot more last year than we are this year. I think for Florida, they're just like, hey, we went out, won 8 games last year. We're better than we were last year. Why can't we improve upon that against these same teams? And let's not forget, I love the scheduling here. Like, we're going to talk an awful lot about LSU, the pressure that's on the Tigers playing Clemson in that first game. Florida played Miami last year in the opener. Now you get LIU and then USF, as you guys talked about. What a great lead up to conference play. Now, it's weird that Florida plays LSU in September. That's a weird change in the schedule, but I like the way that they can ramp things up and kind of be ready for that opener against the Tigers in the SEC.
But Georgia, Florida, largest cocktail.
Yeah. Well, and also don't sleep on USF. That's not a game you can just sleepwalk through with goalless there. Florida's going to be better, which I think you go from LIU, which is a team that you've got beat at birth, basically, but you can't look at it that way. USF will be quality competition to give you a little bit of that'll be good game tape going into the third game. That's not just going to be throw it away, don't show it to them because they're going to get over.
And Florida's plus 105 to win 8 games this year. They are plus 215 to win 9 games.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
which is funny. What was the over/under last year? I think was 5.5.
Yeah,
right?
I believe that's right.
And I think it started at maybe 6 or 6.5. It's gone up a little bit. I think where does it now? 7 or 7.5?
Yeah, it's sitting in the 7 to 8 win game territory. But CD, let me ask you this: is a bowl game enough this year for Florida fans?
Yeah, I know you guys as Auburn folks weren't real happy to hear Hugh Freeze say that. I don't think that's the measuring stick for the Tigers. I don't think it's the measuring stick for Florida either. Yeah. You got back to a bowl game last year. You actually played well in the bowl game, which I think was important to keep that momentum going. But this is, I think, a year that Florida feels like that you could make the argument that getting to 9 wins is attainable. And I believe if you get to 9 wins this year in the SEC, unlike last year, you get to 9 wins because of what happened in the postseason last year, you're going to get in. So I don't think there's any reason to think that Florida couldn't be a team like Tennessee that makes a jump like they did last year into the college football playoff field.
Well, CD, you said something we have been saying here the whole time. Florida is in one of those tiers where, yes, having a brutal schedule, there's a lot of negatives to it, including playing the non-conference that they're going to play against 2 ACC teams in Miami and Florida State, which you got to assume Florida State's going to be better. But on the positive side of that, just like Oklahoma, right? If Oklahoma goes 9-3, if Florida goes 9-3 with that schedule, you're going to have a pretty damn good chance to get into the college football playoff, especially after what happened last year, which you brought up. So getting to that 9-win mark for Florida could mean being one of the last teams that's able to make the college football playoff, and all you got to do is get in. But I want to get back to a position group that I find, and we're used to Florida being talented on the outside. We know about that state and speed. But wide receiver. And you hear the name Wilson, and the first one that pops in your head is Eugene Wilson, right? A guy that's an absolute stud, can score, can hit a home run from both sides of the plate, as we like to say, from anywhere on the field. But I'm looking at Dallas Wilson. And when you look at, and I'm not going to make the comparison to Jeremiah Smith because I think that's unfair, but when I look at body type and ability with a young player, Dallas Wilson looks 30 years old. He looks like he's been in the league for 3 years. This guy, along with Vernell Brown, who's a stud as a young player. People will talk about Sturdivant coming in from UCLA. They'll talk about Eugene Wilson. I'm as excited about the young guys on the outside for Florida that they can mix on the inside as well with Vernell and obviously with Dallas Wilson. I mean, those guys could end up being breakthrough players in year one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And you mentioned Eugene Wilson, Trey Wilson, as they call him. I mean, he was highly recruited, part of a trio that signed a couple years ago and came in, was an immediate impact player. Now, obviously, last year, the injury situation kind of took away some of his effectiveness. But you're talking about getting him back, who presumably is 100% healthy. You some of those young guys, Aiden Mizell, starting to take a step forward, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got some guys that have experience, and then you sprinkle in a trio of freshmen that just signed and highlighted by the Dallas Wilson and Vernell Brown kids that you mentioned. I think now more than I'm not a fan of 7-on-7 and the way that it's the culture of that has changed football. But I will say I think receivers benefit the most. They come in way more prepared than they were before. They come in way more developed. And they actually way more physically developed than what we were. Shoot, I came in at about 175 pounds. You're right. Dallas Wilson looks like a grown-ass man. And the best part about it is that you saw him show out for over 200 yards in the spring game. And I think that even further makes you feel confident about what he and Vernell Brown could add to the mix this season.
Yeah, and I think it's got to come down to, David, and this is something we're going to talk about all year with DJ Lagway and the health, how much, when you surround a guy with weapons, when you have backs like Baugh and Jackson and the depth that they have, an offensive line with Jake Slaughter and Barber and Damian George and some of the moves that they've made, I don't know if you have to run DJ Lagway that much, unless it's fourth and inches to win the game or pounding that last yard or running that power read or stuff like that. I don't know if they've got to run him.
I don't know if you need to, but then that always begs the question of, if you have that mentality, have you already lost? Like with Tim Tebow and Cam Newton and Johnny Manziel, I mean, there's just no question when you need it most what you're going to get. Those guys are going to get it for you any way they need to get it. I think the same is going to be true of DJ Lagway. I think he's a baller, but he shines the most through the air. Chris, I want to ask you about the state of Florida in totality here. I grew up not far from Tallahassee. I was a Florida State fan. I am of the opinion that Florida State, Florida, and Miami should play each other every year, and they have been, so that's great. But Florida State 2-10 a season ago, almost unfathomable. A year after they went undefeated, they bring in 2 new coordinators. They're going to bring in Thomas Castellanos to play quarterback from Boston College. Miami, one of the best seasons we've seen from them in a while a year ago, still didn't win the ACC. Cam Ward goes number 1 overall to the Titans. They bring in Carson Beck to play quarterback from Georgia. How do you view the state of Florida right now? Do people in Florida still see Florida as the top dog in the state?
I'm with you as well. Growing up here in the state of Florida, I grew up in an era in the 80s where the Big Three played every single year. And in the beginning of the 90s, Florida was the epicenter of college football, right? You always had those 3 teams in the top 5. One of my big regrets about my time in Florida is that I never got a chance to play against Miami. And both of my parents are from Miami. We used to go down to the Orange Bowl all the time to watch the Florida-Miami game to open the season every other year down there. So I lament the fact that I didn't get a chance to do that. I do think they should play. I hope they can find a way to continue, especially with the way things have changed up with scheduling out of conference. But I look at those 2 teams that you mentioned. I mean, I'm shocked at how bad the talent on that Florida State roster was last year. I mean, that looked like an FCS roster. By the end of the year, it was embarrassing. That didn't look like the Seminole teams that I remember. And I think it speaks a lot to what Jordan Travis was kind of able to do the year before to overcome some of the deficiencies. Obviously, they had some better receivers around him too. But in Miami, I mean, I was high on Carson Beck last year, and I think the receivers at Georgia did not help Carson Beck out. But I have huge questions about his leadership ability.
Yeah.
I know he's coming off the injury, so I don't know how much he's had a chance to really be out there with his teammates. But listening to some of the stories of how he kind of operated, he was his own guy, away from the team, living on his own. It just doesn't sound like the quarterbacks that I've ever been around. And then you watch the way that they rallied for Gunnar Stockton in the second half of the SEC championship game. Clearly, Georgia had a better connection with him. I'm anxious to see what Carson who has all the skill in the world. I just don't know if he has that leadership ability that Miami needs to continue the run that Cam Ward started last year.
We've been saying similar things.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that was the guy that Kirby that happened in the culture that Kirby has over there in Georgia, coming off Stetson Bennett, who everybody loved. I think that's one of the reasons they love Gunner so much.
Brock Bowers can hide a lot of flaws.
No, he can't. No, Brock Bowers
can
just like with Florida State, he was talking about with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, and then on the defensive side, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and all those guys that they had as well. But CD, man, you're one of the best in the business. You know, we got massive love for you, dog. We're really excited to see you in Atlanta. Can't wait to hang out. Tell everybody, I mean, you're on ESPN, you're on everywhere, but if for some reason people haven't heard and want to follow your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, we got SEC this morning on Sirius XM, the SEC channel 374. That's 8 to 11 Eastern every weekday. And then obviously as we get into the season, we'll be doing our simulcast on the SEC network and the Friday night kind of preview shows, and then all day Saturday during the triple header, culminating with the SEC football final, which most watched show on the network. So love everybody spending their Saturday night with us, and then kind of teeing it up for the next week on Monday mornings with the simulcast on the network. So lots of opportunity to talk college football, man, which I'm so excited, and I appreciate the opportunity to do with you guys today.
Well, quickly, CD, I just want you to know I did pick Florida as my dark horse team for the playoffs this year.
Okay. Oh. And just like that,
you got a lot of ground
totally redeem yourself. But Chris Doering, yeah, go ahead, C.
I was gonna say I like it, man. I'm cautiously optimistic from this camp, and obviously, you know, I try to call it as I see it, but I do think there's reason for Florida to be much more optimistic about maybe sneaking into that field this year.
Yeah, Chris Doering, the man who never ages, and good for him. Chris, thanks again. Thank you guys for watching. Please keep sharing the show. We really appreciate you. Without you, there is no us. And like the chances of me running DJ Lagway more than 5 times a game, if I'm calling the plays, we're going. Ooh, yeah.
Due for a drop.
Gone. No, not dropping it.